Hello, Jenny. Delighted to be chatting with you. Myself and Steve Evans there.
Hi,
Hello.
Jennifer.
Hi.
Hi. Pleased to meet you. You clarify for us. Are you in Garston or are you in Richmond in Surrey at the moment? Or is that where you're living? Where you're living at the moment?
I'm living in Garston, very close to somebody's brother.
Right. That'll be Terry's brother then.
That's
I
our
just
darling,
got the feeling. I read somewhere that you were in Richmond in Surrey as well. Is that not right?
Well, that was with the first book, Strip. So that was 2011. Right. So the bio in that says about working for the Times 100 marketing company or something, husband hero, Richmond, Surrey. So
right, okay,
yeah,
that makes sense.
All of that has changed. So now we're like a decade on.
Okay.
My fault then. I got totally mixed up. Yeah, all right, that makes sense now.
But it is so you've done the correct research. You're just a decade out of date.
It's a little bit, yeah.
So how is Garston? The same as usual. And now Terry's brother apparently lives over the road.
Yeah, it's our dad. Yeah. It's on the same street, isn't it? He's enjoying the book, by the way, Jenny.
So I've been here for a while, and I suppose this is one of those things where you should definitely speak to your neighbour, because I've seen him. He's got a little dog, like my two little girls. They love his dog whenever we see, Bob, whenever we see him. And then it's only maybe 2 weeks ago that we actually started talking, and then I said I was a writer, and then he said he's into his poems, and then said, Terry does all of this. I said we could have done this a year ago if we'd have just chatted earlier. I had no idea we had that in common about creativity and writing and things. You just don't know, do you, until you speak to people?
Yeah, true. Yeah.
That's right.
Can I start before we talk about the book itself? Can I ask about your 10 years in Japan?
Yeah, of course.
Was that a TEFL course? You got there teaching English as a foreign language?
No, well, I did teach English as a foreign language, but at that time, my husband, we're separated now, but he's an academic. So he did his master's and his PhD in Japan. And also his dad is Japanese, so he has family out there. So we went together, and so he was doing his studies and I was teaching English as a foreign language. So I have a business degree from the University of Liverpool. I haven't got any teaching English as a foreign language qualification. But what tends to happen is once you get there, is the conversation schools in Japan are just packed full of American men. So as soon as they see a British woman, it's yes, please. we will train you how to do this, because it is the majority is American men. I'd say between 20 and 40. That's the most common English language teacher you'll have out there. There's not that many British people.
So 10 years in Japan, did you learn to speak Japanese? I would imagine you're probably fairly proficient in it, are you?
Well, it's so embarrassing, because when I first went in the first 2 years, I met some, I think there were actually some British people who'd been there for 10 years and they couldn't speak Japanese. And I was like, that is terrible. I am not going to be that person. And then after 10 years, so I can communicate, because my two children, they were born in Japan. And they're 2 and 3 now, so I can run the numbers with them. I can do the basic greetings. I can do the fruit and veg and the colours. But no, my conversation is dire. I learned enough to get by to ask for something in a shop, and we got through the pregnancies, but that was largely because the doctor was from Peru and he could speak every language.
Does the English habit of speaking louder when people don't speak your language, did that not work? Surprisingly.
Not even so much louder. This is why now when I've been back in Garston, I just get constantly accused of being posh scouts. But it's not, it's just to be understood. So I think because I've been back here now, it's getting faster and faster. I was speaking to my friend the other day. She's Japanese, her English is fantastic, but I could see a couple of times she was kind of going, because it's I have the scouse has returned and the speed has returned, where to be understood, she's had to really slow it down and knock all the slang out, because people just don't understand what you're saying.
Yeah, fair enough.
True enough. So you mentioned on one of your reviews or testimonials or whatever it is, very janky children. Is
Oh,
that
very,
a Japanese?
no, that's a Japanese
that?
word. No,
Right,
so
that's
very,
what.
very genki children.
Oh,
So
genki.
genki is used. It's definitely used for children. It means like lively and vigorous and full of energy. So you can say like a person's very genki. You know, if you meet somebody and they just have a lot of like spirit. So
I thought it was a spelling mistake at first.
For what though? What do you think I was trying to say?
Gentle.
I was like, is this supposed to be gentle or what? I don't know.
Yeah, it doesn't. If you lose the italics, because on different formats you lose the italics. Now that's kind of saying this is a foreign word. Then it just is like, what is that?
We talk about your book then. Can I say something? And this is going to sound facetious, but it's not anyway intentional at all. I started reading and looking at the title, The Mu Chronicles. The first thing I thought of was an old song from the 90s, KLM and Tammy Wynette, Mu Land.
Yeah.
Is there any connection with that?
Well, I mean that's because Mu is it's like the idea of that is if it's like Atlantis, so this lost ancient, some people say lost ancient city, lost ancient country, lost ancient continent. So all bound for Mu Land, and that's all tied up in there. And if you see sort of videos that you see all like the Egyptian influences, they went the Japanese way. There's a few Japanese characters and stuff there. And I knew that song. I'm like the age where that was just playing constantly.
I thought you were too young for that.
Oh no, what's her name with Tammy Wynette and all of that. Yeah. It's a tune. That is an absolute tune.
Brilliant. I was scared of asking that. Not scared, but I was thinking, am I going to sound as though I'm being sarcastic or insulting in some way? But I'm glad that rings. Good.
Yeah, and I think that's what I think they're into all of that, aren't they? That whole like what would you call it? Just like alternate realities and alternate histories and so I think that's what they were drawn to with that, like, because the idea of Mu as well is that perhaps it's like aliens who came and went, and that's where all of that knowledge came from about like the pyramids and science, and so it has got that conspiracy theory attached to it as well.
Okay.
And that's absolutely what my book's based on. So it's the Mu Chronicles. The first one is called Beneath the Burning Wave, and the whole lore and myth of Mu is that pretty much overnight a catastrophic event happened, a volcano tsunami that just destroyed a civilization essentially overnight. So obviously that's just like a really compelling idea. So when I first heard about that, it was like, well, what could possibly happen to cause that? So then it just merged with other ideas and things that I'd had, but ultimately what could cause a catastrophe like that?
Like an asteroid hitting the Earth, destroying the dinosaurs.
Could destroy a civilization. And that's if you look on Wikipedia or stuff like that, that's the mythology of Mu, that it was this advanced civilization that pretty much ended overnight.
Okay.
And you've got a book launch, haven't you, later this month at Waterstones? Is that right for this book?
Well, we're doing an event, so I'm going to be doing that with Anne Seelin. So she's wrote a fabulous book that also has like the Japanese influences. So she's not Japanese, but she spent time in Japan in Chiba, and all running through her book is this idea of like origami that can come to life. So that's the connection, and hers is like young adult fantasy as well. So we're just going to be so it's less of a launch, it's just us talking about young adult fantasy and the connection being we've both been inspired by Japan.
I wouldn't have minded going to that, but I'm not even in the country, unfortunately. Like, so I'm on holiday. But would have been a good event, that, by the sounds of it.
When is it again, Jennifer?
So it's on I think Wednesday the 21st of September.
Okay. And can anyone go along?
Anyone can go, but it is paid. So I think it's like £4 or something. So you have to do it through the Waterstones site. And book a ticket.
Yeah, 6:30 p.m. it is, Terry. I've just seen it on Jennifer's Twitter account.
Okay, I'll flag that up as well when I put this out on there. You've been to a few of these events, haven't you, Steve? Waterstones.
Yeah, I've been to a few Waterstone ones over the years from various different authors, and they're normally quite a decent night, you know, and they're quite intimate because you only get about 50 odd people in there if they do it in the same area, and but it is good. It's good, you know, to meet authors and have a chat to them because it's not like there's hundreds and hundreds of people there and you can't move. So yeah, I quite enjoy
And let's
them.
be honest,
Yeah.
most of them are probably going to be related to me in one way or another.
Have you got a big family in Liverpool?
How these things go.
Yeah. Is it a big family in Liverpool, Jenny?
Well, we are from Liverpool, so my parents live in Stockbridge Village or Cantrell Farm, depending on your age.
Yeah.
And they still live there, and then they moved over from Liverpool 8 to Cantrell Farm, so we still we are like a Liverpool family.
Do you know what was weird? We spoke on Saturday to Michelle Cobbett, and I thought I just had in my mind, looking at her profile, that she was from Wales. Well, we weren't sure whether it was from Wales or down south, and she was a Scouser from Stockbridge Village.
Oh,
that's weird. Brilliant, though.
There's a few like creative people come out of Stockbridge Village. It's like the farm, isn't it? And then what was that?
Oh yeah, of course.
Band. Oh, I remember because I used to live across the road from my friend Jamie. What's that band called? It's like Space.
Space. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Well, we got there.
Yeah.
So, Jenny, the book, it's part 1 of a trilogy then. How far are you along with the other 2 and 3?
Well, I'm late delivering book 2. That's just how these things go.
Have you got a deadline to meet?
Yeah, I did have, yes. I passed it. But to be fair, this, because with COVID and all different things, like the publication date moved and moved and moved. So we're still okay. We're still on schedule, but I do need to, I need to hand that in like this month, basically. And I'm nearly there. I'm at the point where I was dying to just get rid of it, but now it's coming to a close. I don't want to let go of it until it's like perfect. So I've tipped into that other bit now where it was like, please get rid of it. And I was like, no, it's not.
Your baby, isn't it? It's your baby, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you connected with. Sorry, I was going to just follow on from that. With you connected with this publisher, which is Harper Collins, I take it. And did you find that easy to do? Getting that publisher, or was it a massive struggle, as most people seem to?
I've got all of those numbers, like 100 agent rejections and all of that. So my publishing journey was, I had that book out 2011, but that was non-fiction. And then while I was in Japan doing the teaching and whatever, I was still writing, still doing like short stories, like entering them into different like competitions and whatever. And then I noticed like agents that I was interested in, or the writers that I was interested in, I noticed a lot of them had done this Faber Academy course. So it's pretty expensive. So if you do the like bricks and mortar one in London, it can, I think it costs as much as an MA would. It's like £4,000 or £5,000.
Steep.
It is a lot. And then, but because I was in Japan, I did the online version, which was like half the price of that. But the thing with the Faber Academy course, it is like a hit maker. Like the amount of writers who've done that course and have been published, I mean, it's in like the hundreds, like their hit rate is unbelievable. And one of the reasons for that is at the end of the course, you get like 6 months to like polish your manuscript up, and then they put it into an anthology and send it to hundreds agents.
Okay.
Like in and around London. So out of 100 agents, I received 0 replies. So it was like, okay, that's not great. So then in that time, I like polished the manuscript. I had like 2 kids, and then what happened was, like the whole Black Lives Matter movement, when George Floyd was murdered. As with a lot of industries, especially the big corporate industries, they like threw the doors open to Black people and to people of colour, and did like call outs for whatever. So Harper Collins did this call out for Black writers, and it was like an open submission. But I was talking to somebody else about this, because it was, although I mean it's wonderful, and that ultimately is how I got in. It's such a finite opportunity, because what they wanted was within a month a full manuscript. So I was obviously in a position where I'd done like fairly prestigious course. I polished it. I'd been polishing it over the years. So what I delivered to them was a pretty clean manuscript.
Yeah.
So it was like, it's quite a tough.
Timing sounds perfect for that.
It was basically, I was leaning on the door just swung open. And I was like, I've got this manuscript absolutely ready to go. And that's what they wanted the entire, it wasn't like 10,000 words in a pitch. They wanted the whole manuscript. And quite a lot of the open submissions for Black writers, Black creators at that time, that it had that criteria on it, that they wanted a finished piece of work, which it's tough. It's quite specific position to be in and to take advantage of. Well, I was, and that's what happened for me. And so essentially I went direct to publisher.
Okay.
So would you say your life has altered much then since you launched that book? You've talked about the Black Lives thing, which obviously helped you out a bit, but would you say your life's altered apart from that with book launches or getting out there and being a bit more?
Well, the thing is, because of the deadlines that I agreed to were pretty crazy. So because the first one was so polished and done, my contract, I essentially agreed to write like 2 more within like 2 years. And I mean, that was like crazy, given, as I said, I do have, I became a single mother, and like we included moving back to Liverpool. So that's why, we've gone over some of the deadlines.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's obviously an enormous change, and it's been good because now all I do is writing. So in terms of my job, my 2 jobs are being a mother to 2 very young children and a writer. So I have like an office just round the corner, and I go and write and do that every day. And I would say that book 2 is better than book 1. It just is, because of having that discipline of writing every single day and really committing to being a writer. And I would say that that's something that's, maybe it does come from like the whole Harper Collins thing or whatever, but I do feel like now I've gotten in, I'm in. It's to maintain now. And that just seems to be all the time with, if you want to make writing a profession, the goalposts just keep moving. It's like, at first it's like just even finishing a manuscript is incredible. And then to get an agent, to get a publisher, to do any kind of sales, and then it's on to the next one. So my goal, absolutely now, having experienced living as a writer, working as a writer as a full-time profession, is to maintain this. So I would say that's how my life's changed. This is what I want to do.
Jenny, can I ask you about the style of the book? I started reading the opening chapters today, and you do think something with the pronouns. There's no his or her or she or him.
No.
People call they say it's rather than that person. Why is that? Have you got a reason behind that? Is that just something that you agree with?
Well, I mean, I suppose like this conversation just over the last 10 years has just really developed and gone into the mainstream, this idea of moving away from binary pronouns, so saying there's only she and he, and so there's lots of people now use the singular they. So if somebody's not non-binary, they would use they. So in terms of on Mu, I would say more so than it being like a non-binary, it's more that they're agender. So it's like gender just does not exist. And the intent of that is that, because I'm like a cis woman, so I'm interested in like the origin of gender. So taking it as something that maybe hasn't always existed, like what was beforehand. So before, there had to be a way to refer to each other than she and he and his and her. So that was the process really of using, so rather than using singular they, which people do use now, I decided to create new pronouns, so essentially neo pronouns, and that's mu, me, mem.
Okay. It does stand out, reading it. I struggled for the first couple of lines, but you sort of get into the rhythm of it, and it just doesn't matter. That's the way this is written.
Yeah, and that's also is like, an intent. So at the back of the book, there's like an essay just talking about like weaving the world of Mu, and I talk about that whole thing with the Black Lives Matter, and I also just talk about about like gender, and that my hope for this book would be if someone can read this book, then they can address somebody with the pronoun that they ask to be referred to, because there's a lot of I feel it's a little bit intellectually disingenuous, this idea, like it's such an effort to refer to someone as they. Obviously, if you're unfamiliar with it, whatever, it's like, what the intent can be to be kind and to respect that. It's not just like, I don't recognize you as that, so I'm going to keep using he or she or whatever. I mean, I just think it's so rude and it's cruel if that's how somebody's asking you to use something else. So I did, it's not my identity, but I am happy to contribute to this conversation of just looking at something different ways to refer to each other. And what I find interesting, like little bits of feedback I've had, is because it does change later in the book, and it becomes he, she, and some people said, oh, I didn't realize that character was he, or I didn't realize he was she. So all of that's coming as you go through it. So it's just challenging those gendered expectations, like what do you think was going on here? And that's why it would also be referred to as queer fiction, because there are, once you realise what gender people are, there are same-sex couples and bisexual, and all of it's going on in there. Within like what I hope is just a banging story. That's the thing. It is also like an adventure story, as I said it from the beginning. You know, it's building up to this catastrophe, and it has these identities in it, which to a certain extent are incidental. There's not like it's not about trauma or prejudice to people who are non-binary or anything like that. It's not about that.
Twitter. Do you use other social media to promote your books, like Facebook or Instagram?
No, and to be honest, I wouldn't even use Twitter. To be honest, my preference would be nothing. Just go old school all the way. You just have a book out and that's it. That would be So I don't do those writer lifts and follow for follows, and it's not really mine.
The Harper Collins, are they helping with the marketing? Are they taking some of that weight off you, the publisher?
Oh yeah, well my my publisher is One More Chapter, and they're like the digital imprint of Harper Collins. So they're heavy social media users. So they're Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. So they
that sort of answers that then. Yeah. You published another book, didn't you, back in 2012 called Strip: The Bare Reality of Lap Dancing. That was obviously based on your own experience, was it? Because you did that for a couple of years, didn't you?
Yeah, but it's funny because like that book was like 10 years ago, and then the experience of working in Blackpool, because Blackpool was like topless dancing. But it is, when I think about it, and obviously because it's it links all the books on Amazon and all of that, so it's come back round again. Like if I just think the thought of going to Blackpool and basically taking my top off, it's just so far removed from that, as like a lot of things that happened in my 20s are. But the reason for that book was because I think, and probably you can hear when I was just talking about like the gender stuff before, I do believe like in activism and activism in writing. So I had that experience of 2 years like to fund university doing topless dancing in Blackpool. But at that time in the media was a lot about the lap dancing's not the same as like other sex work. It's like it's its own glamorous, fabulous entity, and like we can make £1,000 in a night, and it was just like that in the press. And that wasn't my experience, and it wasn't the experience of a lot of the women that I worked with. So I felt like I wanted to just counteract that in some kind of way. So Stripped is an anthology of different women who either like working as lap dancers or working waitress in Spearmint Rhino, whatever, like a partner of someone who was using lap dancing, just all different women who are directly and indirectly affected by lap dancing. But it very much has an agenda. It is like a feminist critique of lap dancing.
Like so my exposure.
Yeah, well, yes, and I suppose like a little bit of whistleblowing, really, because
Yeah.
it's all people who were in there. And my feeling is that like there's no like I don't feel ashamed of that experience. But the thing that I don't like is that it was very exploitative. So it's all things like you pay to work there, and then so you're in debt before you even begin. So how it worked in Blackpool was like you pay them £70. It's like a house fee. So then you start on less money, and that just leads to all dubious things and promoting dubious decisions. You know what I mean? It was like very young women. Like at the time, I was like in my early 20s, and as I said, now I'm nearly 40. If I think about myself, then I just want to give myself a big hug. You know what I mean? And just be like, you don't need to do that. Don't do that. You know what I mean? But it's what happened. It's part of my life.
You survived it.
Yeah, and then one of the other things was I just wanted, if somebody was choosing to get into it, they could just read something that is other than saying it's marvellous, you know what I mean? So you go in a bit more with your eyes open. So I know this is where feminism is like, often it can just splinter off. So I would never, ever condemn or denigrate anyone who's done that, because that's I understand the reasons why you would go into. My critique is of the industry that's built on this and is exploiting young women.
Okay.
And at that time, but obviously because so much just changed with like online pornography or different things, like lap dancing clubs, I'm almost come to an end, a demise, because of how things all went online, rather than there being a real social change about it. I think people will still consume women in some way. And as I said, I just always think that absolutely sex work is work. If it exists, it should absolutely be safe, and all the things should be there to safeguard women, and it should be women first industry, and it just so often isn't. And I just think that I would encourage you to just think a little bit more critically about it. And it's not a condemnation like that's bad, because that doesn't help anybody. You don't get any nuanced discussion from that. It gets a bit puritanical, and I'm not about that.
Okay. Have you had any approaches from film companies to buy the rights of the Mu Chronicles? You have? Brilliant.
Woo! But what we're doing is, because I'm now agented, so the book will come out in America in November. So it seems a bit sensible to just wait until that happens, and whose attention it gets when that happens.
Brilliant.
Talked about basically you've got two things going on in your life. You've got kids to look after and bring up, and you've got your little office or your office where you do your writing. And do you have a set routine for that? Do you write certain times of the day or
well,
the
the
night?
thing is, I mean, I have to, and I would discourage anybody who's a parent, and especially single parent, from trying to do the writing while they're asleep thing, because it is insanity inducing. So if you can, and if you can afford it, at least take like the 15 hours that everybody gets and find a nice nursery and write then. So I write while they're in nursery, and then if they're away at the weekend, I'll write at the weekend as well. I do find it, because I suppose because how I parent, I do find it quite difficult to like have one eye on them and then be thinking. I just like it like the two separate things. I find that I get frustrated in both areas if I'm trying to do both at the same time. It is better to make it.
It's a tough life balance when you've got especially two young ones of your age, 2 and 3. It's wow, what a nightmare.
But for now, we'll say thanks, and let's keep in touch.
Oh yes, please.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Jennifer.
Thank you both. Thank you. Really interesting questions. Thank you.
Good.
Thanks a lot.
On Twitter, as I say, I'm useless on Twitter, but thank you for the things that you do forward whenever I remember to do it.
Okay.